Okay, are we good? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call to order this May 15th meeting of the Independent Ethics Board for the City of Tallahassee. We have a few interesting things to do today. A note that we have everyone present, so we have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our April 17th meeting. Does anybody have any edits or corrections? Seeing none, Mr. Davis moves the approval of the minutes and Ms. McNeil seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Minutes are approved. We are on the Ethics Officer report. I am going to jump to, before we get there, down to item 7 on our agenda, since everyone by now should know that I'm not going to follow Julie's agenda. So, no, I'm sorry, not item 7, item F. Can't read. Not only do I not follow agendas, I can't read my own writing. Item F is on here so that we can, before we get into the meat of today's meeting, I wanted to go over for everyone, myself included, a review of exactly what our jurisdiction is as a board. So we all know that some months back we submitted a series of recommendations concerning expansion of our jurisdiction to the City Commission. The City Commission did some of those, I say most of those, with some modifications that mostly narrowed what we had suggested. So, Julie, you want to walk us through these? You want me to do it? I'm happy to have you do it.
Well, we can run through them really quickly, and then...
So again, we're on item 3F, which is the two ordinances 17-0-45 and 17-0-46AA.
Okay. So I'm hearing feedback here in this microphone. So these here on the first page, ordinance number 17-0-45. These are some of the expansions to our jurisdiction that the chair previously referenced, specifically Section 2-6, which states that no elected or appointed official shall corruptly use or attempt to use his or her position or any city property or resource which may be within his or her trust or perform or fail to perform his or her official duties to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for themselves or others valued at more than $25. In Section B, they go ahead and define terms like special privilege, benefit, exemption, compensation, and resource. In section...
Before you move on, let me jump in here and point out a couple things. In terms of our jurisdiction, and this will be an issue that we'll end up discussing today, I'm sure, note that misuse of position obviously is very broad, and one reason is the members who were on the board at the time we made the recommendation will recall this was the number one or the largest category of complaints dealt with by the State Commission on Ethics. So we thought that misuse of position would be one of the most valuable expansions of our resource. There are three critical elements of this. One, it applies only to elected and appointed officials. So that would be, is that 10 people? Elected and appointed?
5 commissioners and 4 appointed.
9 people. So it would apply to 9 people, elected and appointed officials, and not to any of the other city employees or managers. It also requires that the misuse of position be corrupt. That was something the City Commission added that comports with state law on ethics violations. It is narrower than the state law on criminal violations of misuse of official position, excuse me. And third, it only applies where the person is securing a benefit for themselves or others. a special privilege benefit or exemption. So that, again, is narrow in the sense that if they are seeking to disadvantage someone, but not to the advantage of someone else, it probably doesn't fit within misuse of position. I'm sorry, Julie, that was my interruption.
No, I appreciate that interruption and that clarification. If you go next to Section 2-8, you'll see that that provision pre-existed the board's existence. This was additional financial disclosure for elected officials. So in addition to the Form 1 that the elected officials file at the Supervisor of Elections, the elected officials also have additional disclosures that they file with the City Treasurer Clerk on July 1st of each year, and they disclose those items referenced above: business relationships with city vendors, city employees, membership on corporate and not-for-profit boards, and land ownership. So again, that was before the board existed. Likewise, they define what business relationships are and the location and time of filing. Something that was added this most recent time, when they added misuse, they also added this provision D, that in addition to filing their state financial disclosure forms and their quarterly gift disclosure forms with the city's treasurer clerk, in addition to the filing required pursuant to Florida statutes. So the reason for that is for, hopefully, citizen access, that they can go to that webpage and they can see not only the city's required disclosure forms, but they can also see copies of what the commissioners have filed with the Supervisor of Elections or the Commission on Ethics in the way of gifts. So that was added. Section 2-13 was solicitation or acceptance of gifts. And again, this was a recent addition after board recommendation, and it deals with the solicitation of gifts. And we added some language in there, or they added some language in there regarding lessees of city property. And additionally, they put in Section B a limit to the aggregate value that one may accept from one individual. So what they're going to do is aggregate gifts from a party for the year, and you can only accept $100 in gifts in 1 year. So in that way, it is stricter than the state ethics code, and I would remind everyone, Mr. Chair, too, that the local governments are able to make stricter requirements than the state ethics code, which is why we have that here. And let's see, and then there's an exclusion for relatives. And then
once again, note that this applies only to our 9 elected and appointed officials.
Correct.
So would not apply to any other city manager, supervisor, or employee other than the appointed officials.
You're right in that, Mr. Chair, and later on in the meeting, at your request, we're going to go through similar requirements placed on employees in general. In Section 2-14, under penalties, what was added most recently was the requirement for a sworn complaint. In the past, that had not been required. So the board will still accept an unsworn complaint, but there can only be a sanction attached to one that is sworn. And that's repeated there in 2-14 paren F, that method is not required to utilize the ethics and fraud hotline. Then in Section 2-22, that was also a change from the past, that matters that proceed through the probable cause stage and are at a complaint stage. The board will not be trying those here. They will be forwarding those to the Division of Administrative Hearings, where the fact-finding will be conducted by an ALJ, and findings of fact, conclusions of law, and then it would come back to the board for a penalty. So that sums up, when an ethics complaint is concurrently filed with the Independent Ethics Board and filed with another agency, the Ethics Board suspends its action on the complaint until the conclusion of the law enforcement agency or state ethics commission review. So that would just hold the matter in abeyance for the board's consideration until the other body concluded their work on the matter.
And we did get an opinion from Mr. Currington that, because obviously we would not necessarily know about a law enforcement investigation or even about an investigation being conducted by the State Commission on Ethics, that we would have to use due diligence to try to discover those things. And if using due diligence we didn't find out about them, we wouldn't be violating this if we had no reasonable way because someone was conducting a preliminary investigation that was not yet public.
So I believe that that sums up the scope of the board's authority. The other thing, just to remind everyone, is the board lacks the seventh member that it's supposed to have. So the commission is going to place on the ballot whether the voters are okay with the public defender making that appointment to the board.
Okay. Any questions, comments? I mean, we're going to keep, over the next couple of months, we've already started, and we will keep a running list of our kind of blue sky ideas about expansions or clarifications of jurisdiction. So there may be things in what we already have that we feel hamstring us, or there may be other new issues that we feel are appropriate to add. And I would put in a plug for Mr. Currington's ongoing position that anything that we do that parrots the state ethics code comes with a body of law interpreting it. So it is that anytime we do track Chapter 112, we get a very known set of cases and opinions and interpretations that would go with that language, as opposed to something that we would write new and fresh. Okay, so now we're back to item 3A, the Ethics Officer Report. This is Julie's monthly summary report. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, anything on here that you particularly want to point out to us?
Well, there were some community activities that I participated in this month. I do find some of these of value because it allows me to connect with different citizens, and every time I get a chance, I can talk about this board and the work that it's done. And then I followed up on a lot of the tasks. As you can see in our agenda, the board requested a lot of stuff to be discussed today, so I followed up on a lot of that. Particularly, I did speak with communications regarding putting into the power bills information related to the campaign contribution refund program. So I was told that that indeed will be possible, and that I thought the right timing for that was June or July, because we're getting into the primary season at that point, and I think they already had the insert formatted for the next few bills. But I'm going to be working with them to get the right language in there to familiarize everyone with that. So they were willing to cooperate on that, which I appreciated. The other issues are, again, the engagements I do both locally and sometimes people come ask me to come elsewhere. raising the board's profile here in the community is something that's important. Every time I've talked to someone in the community or to a group like Rotary or Kiwanis, they're always enlightened because they hear different things and read different things in the press, or they hear it discussed, and then they hear kind of a factual presentation on the board. I found that helpful. So I talked to the chair, and I know many of you here on the board are involved in other organizations that sometimes try to scare up speakers. And if any of you are in such an organization and are in need of a speaker, I am always eager to come and talk about the work of the board and what it hopes to accomplish. And I always talk about the good work of Citizens for Ethics Reform in every presentation. So this is just a plug that it's a part of my job that I enjoy. So if y'all have ideas for me, I'd appreciate it if you'd share.
Okay. Questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe? Seeing none. We're going to move to complaints. And as usual, we will go through them numerically, starting with case 112. This is the Fernandez case that's before the State Commission on Ethics. Opinion expected next month, June. I believe in June. So yeah, I'm thinking for discussion purposes for us, probably it just stays pending till we see what the State Commission does, just so we make sure that we have it on our agenda to discuss.
I think they're going to do a probable cause finding in June 8th. So it'll be a probable cause hearing. So they'll either decide to move it forward or they won't at that meeting.
Okay. Well, we'll get an update at our next meeting and keep it on there until it is closed one way or another, so the board is fully advised. Item 117. This is the issue related to misuse of city P cards or purchase cards. There is an audit, and we are awaiting the finalized audit and the results of that audit, at which point we will have a presentation by the city auditor, presumably I don't know if it'll be the person who did the audit or the new auditor, but we will have a presentation before the board on that. So that one, I believe, would also stay pending.
Correct.
Unless anybody has a different view. Okay. Item 122, Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
Okay. This was the matter that was discussed last month, and Mr. Goad came and presented his report to the board. There had been, I think, a recommendation to close it. However, I was instructed to provide, before the board made a final determination, some materials that were forwarded with this agenda, including, first of all, I think Mr. Goad's report is included only because you all maybe did not have a chance to read all of it upon its presentation to you, like right before the last meeting. So for your reference, I included that at the request of the chair. The next item that's included for you is we have the personnel policies and procedures 709.02, and these are the policies and procedures that would apply to city employees. So our chair pointed out that many of the ethics code provisions only apply to elected and appointed officials, whereas these particular things apply to every employee of the city. So I would highlight for you on page 3 of that policy and procedure 709, there's something called conduct unbecoming a city employee, and there you will find misuse of city position and also the second to next bullet down, soliciting or accepting an unauthorized fee or gift. So that is there. The next item that I have for you is also from Personnel Policies and Procedures, Chapter 706.
Julie, before you move off of page 3,
Yes.
would the members of the board object to adding those items to our blue sky list of possible jurisdiction expansions? Not for city elected officials and appointed officials, but for anybody in the city, that our jurisdiction would extend to potentially misuse of city positions, city records, or soliciting or accepting an unauthorized fee or gift. Again, it's a blue sky list. We'll come back to it as a board and make some decisions, and we'll get our legal counsel to draft us wonderful language so we can see what we'd actually be recommending, if anything.
Mr. Chair.
Sir.
Actually, maybe for Julie, a question. Do we know, do these personnel policies apply to the, at least the appointed officials?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Okay, so Julie, you'll add those to our blue sky list?
Yes. So, okay, to put in the code is what you're
Yes.
saying. Okay. Codify. Okay. The next item I'd highlight for you from existing policies and procedures is Chapter 706, page 10, sub C. It's conflict of interest, and they reflect in the preamble section 112, 311 of the Ethics Code, and state what the intent is, that there's an absence of substantial conflict with the proper discharge of duties in the public interest. And I would call attention to language in sub 1, the solicitation or acceptance of gifts, loans, rewards that may present a perception that the person's going to be influenced by them. And then also highlighting number 4, that a public officer or employee should not use their position to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for the employee or others. So these are, and then there's, acceptance of gratuities on F. So there is also, related to gifts, that you can only accept promotional goods, those sorts of things that don't exceed a retail value of $100. And I think that was something that the board suggested, because there was some inconsistency about what a city employee could accept versus a reporting individual. So related to that complaint, Mr. Chair, you asked me to provide those documents so that the board may be better advised to act on this matter 122.
Okay, I think, not to call anybody out, but I think Dr. Jackson's been the one
Oh, there was also a letter from Dr. Jackson
particularly pushing this issue.
that I neglected to mention.
Is there any activity on this issue that would have occurred after our jurisdiction was expanded, or did it all occur before our jurisdiction was expanded?
Before.
Dr. Jackson, you're recognized. Please. I was assuming as soon as I said your name, you'd jump up.
I didn't mean to not reference his letter.
Progress is good, I'm told. I don't believe it yet, but.
Dr. Owen Jackson, 1341 Jackson Bluff, sometimes called the Tallahassee Truth Teller. I sent you a email, and I was glad to see it was listed here, and hopefully everyone has read it. I came here several months ago and spoke, and I asked this commission just to do a couple things. I said that I knew there was a couple city employees who were taking tickets from Adam Corey, a good friend, treasurer of the mayor, city lobbyist, and to me, if you have someone in that capacity as lobbyist giving gifts to city employees, I would call that a bribe. I don't think anyone at the manager's level or department heads, they understand when you take something of value from someone else and put it in your pocket, it's probably a bad idea. This body decided to ask Reese Gold to do an investigation. The question that I raised was not for a person, Reese Gold, with your direction, to investigate just the two people I knew of. I've got 3 or 4 others, but I gave you 2 names just to show that here's where you begin the investigation. I didn't say only look at the one game. I want to look at the illegal taking of tickets through all games and all city employees. When Reese got that information, he spent months working on it. The report that was written, you're asking what has happened that is unethical or a violation. The date of the games may have been before, but I'll tell you the reporting, the writing of that report, that was corrupt. Okay, what Reese did, and I think the question is who directed Reese to only include the 2 names I gave them? Who told Reese to only look at the attendance at one game? Okay, the person who could benefit from that would certainly be our mayor. His brother was up there quite a bit. I think we'll be reading about his brother in a paper in the next couple of weeks as well. Not to get off topic. I see a recommendation here, and I assume it says recommend closed. Is that the recommendation of Reese, or is that the recommendation of the ethics officer?
That would be the ethics officer.
Definitely, okay. I think that is the worst possible thing that you can do. There is a complaint. There are facts found. It was the limited, the smallest. The goal was, how can I write a report and keep the value of the tickets under $100? And how can I limit the damage to only these 2 people? There was no intention to investigate this. We know that some employees got several tickets for several games. Did you see that in the report? No. So the point being, Reese Gold and his supervisors, that would be the city commissioners, asked him, helped him focus on this evaluation, this investigation, and the end result was established way before he began. You have to find the value less than $100. But even given that, the fact, and he never asked any of the people, the 2 that he talked with, did you get 2 tickets? Did you attend more games? Of course, he's not going to ask that question because the answer would be yes and yes, which means the $100 cap is completely busted. So, if what I would request, my recommendation, is you hire a investigator with some criminal investigative skills. They did an investigation. Then let's have the ethics board do an investigation and get the facts. I don't think anyone up here believes the facts were presented by Reese Gold. That was a cover-up version. If there's a money problem, I would be more than happy to donate and pay for the investigation out of personal funds, and I'll be glad to donate it to the ethics board. If we say we're going to accept this joke, I don't know if I mentioned, but the city commissioner, Gil Ziffer, went to Tiger Bay a couple of days after that report came out. He's laughing at it. He said, have you heard the city? He was up there talking about 400 people. He said, have you heard the city has a new policy? And we're excited about it. If city employees want to buy a football ticket, there's no problem. It costs you $99.99 for one ticket, $49.99 for two tickets, $33.33 for three tickets. Now, no one up here is laughing. It's kind of funny, but they're laughing at you. If you accept this report, Gil Ziffer thinks it's a joke. The people in the room were laughing. We can't stop now and say, oh, we'll accept that as a fact. Close the book. If you close the book on this one, and this report took place while you were here, then the credibility that you have, and it's not much, to be honest with you. You guys are doing a great job, but the credibility is minimal because the limitations and restrictions you have to live under. If we have an ethics board and they can't go after city commissioners as they have in the past, if they can't go after other city employees, you're an independent ethics board. One last thing I'll say, every employee, every person running for city commission that chats with me, I'm asking them for one thing. I'm asking them to agree to give this board 100% independence to write an ethics policy that you feel this community needs, and for them to vote to approve it without reading it. You're the board, you're the experts, you write the ordinance, and the city commissioners should have no input whatsoever. And you'll be surprised the number of candidates agree with that. Thank you very much. We have to investigate this. It's shameful what they did, and if you allow them to get away with it, it's just like I told Curtis Richardson at a city commission meeting yesterday, or on May 9th, you can look the other way, but you're just as bad as a guilty person if you're looking the other way. Don't look away from this. Thank you so much for the time.
Members? Mr. Sims.
My name is Stanley Sims. I'm at 1320 Avondale Way. I went and picked up the Citizens Ethics Guide. And I was sitting here after our conversation. But I was listening to Mr. Jackson, and it says the appearance of impropriety. But listen at how we describe that and how your ethic board describes this. It says, appearance matters. Therefore, government officials and employees should consider how an action looks to others before they act. Even if something is legal, it might fail the smell test if citizens found out about it. Citizens found out about it. But now, this is what disturbed me, Chairman, is this example. Listen at this example. For example, a city employee should not stop at a convenience store to buy a beer in a city vehicle wearing a shirt with a city emblem on it, even if the employee is on break and plans to drink the beer at home. This gives the appearance of impropriety. So if I look at the appearance of impropriety, and a guy came to my house, Colonel Grant, and tried to sell me 2 tickets to a skybox for $100 or a ticket, and he told me that beer and liquor was included, and that's a city employee. The appearance of a propriety, because it goes to the fact of credibility. And in my last little closing little mark here, notice how they talk about how hard the policies are on our people who fix our potholes, watch our children at our community centers. Look how they clear the directions are. But as you go further up the ladder, it's less direction about the appearance of propriety. I just wanted to drop that into your soul.
Okay, we are on number 122. Comments, questions, board members? Recommendation is that because these are activities, the gifts, the tickets, were gifts that predated our jurisdiction, that we close it. I think I would like to propose an alternative recommendation. One is we leave it open because when the Commission on Ethics rules next month, they may release information that would have a bearing on this, because their whole investigation is about the gift giver in these cases, the prior city manager. Second, I think it might be appropriate for, rather short of a full investigation, to have Julie at least get the names of the employees who got tickets from the prior city manager and the games for which they received tickets. In other words, how many people, how many tickets per person. And third, I'd like to come back at our next meeting with a letter to the management staff, management and supervisory staff of the city, talking specifically about this board's attitude towards gifts between city employees, whether it's from a boss down to employees or from employees up to a boss, and the fact that no one should feel compelled to have to give a gift, no one should feel compelled to have to receive a gift, and that in doing so they should be aware of the appearance that the gift may have both to people outside the system and to people inside the system, where the gift might be perceived as, for instance, favoritism from a boss to a particular employee within that unit. Something along those lines that would be the board's concerns after having listened for months to this issue of gifts between city employees. So I got those 3 possibilities. If anybody on the board thinks any of them is a good idea.
Like all of them.
Appreciate all of them.
Okay. Yes. Let's do this. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, so Julie, we're going to hold this open, and you got the other 2 things in your notes, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll stretch this out another 30 days.
Mr. Chair, I got a question.
Colonel Grant.
Yeah, just, I know I missed some stuff, so I'm trying to catch up a little bit, but based on the initial discussions here today, where you talked about 9 people to whom these rules apply, the folks who received those tickets were not among those 9.
Not among the 9. The
Okay.
gift giver in that case would be one of the 9.
Right. No, I got that. But the
but-
ones who received it, because the gift giver is a separate one. We already kind of dealt with that, I think.
Yeah.
And,
One-
and it's being dealt with at the state level. But
Correct.
the recipients of the tickets are not under jurisdiction. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I know one of the things I heard was that when the city manager comes and offers you a free ticket, if you work, for him, either or him or her, if you work for the city manager directly or indirectly, you might feel compelled to have to take it. And I think that's something that I personally would want to go on record as saying cannot be true in an organization, that you can't be compelled to take a gift from your boss for a wide variety of reasons. None of us ought to be compelled to take any gift from anybody. If it's a gift, then it seems to me you can refuse it, and should be circumspect, actually, in receiving gifts from your boss for a wide variety of reasons. But you are correct.
All right, although I guess what I've heard here, just in testimony, I guess, if we want to call it that, is that there is another person involved in giving tickets, or is that not been established?
There's several, and if you ask Rick Goh, if you ask him, he's going to say, well, I investigated these two, because those were the only two names I gave him. That's why I said, unless Julie investigates, and that's, I think, what a criminal person back then, investigate who's taking tickets. If you ask him, he could say two. It's just two. Well, the one woman, the female involved, took two tickets, one for her and her husband. Okay, so right off the bat, if she had two, how do they keep that under $100?
Okay, Dr. Jackson, you're not on the microphone, so what I'm going to, Dr. Jackson's saying that he believes that there are far more than the two people. He's not sure the city will own up to the fact that more than two people got tickets, and the value of the tickets, once again, is particularly if there are multiple tickets, would far exceed the $100. I think your question was about the gift giver. And I believe that the allegations so far have been that all of these tickets were given by the city manager. Right. That I have not heard an allegation that a lobbyist or a vendor gave a ticket directly to a city employee. Tickets were, the city manager got tickets from whatever source, and then gave tickets, gifted or re-gifted those tickets to city employees who either worked directly or at some hierarchical level below him.
That's what I was trying to clarify, that point right there. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we will be back at this issue. Here are my notes. On a letter. Okay. It's just on the back of a piece of paper. Item 133. This is this Mr. Sims?
It is, and I know
the next two are Mr. Sims. So Mr. Sims, you're going to be up here as we get to items 133 and 134.
Okay.
Julie, would you remind us the detail on 133, please?
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into as much detail as I went last month, because I think the board members recall that this individuals had several issues related to a program that he wishes to implement for felons that are getting out of prison. So there was a process set up, or there is a process with which the city vets these particular projects and makes recommendations about whether they should proceed through to leadership and then ultimately for funding. In the course and scope of that discussion and trying to work that through, various security limitations were placed on this individual for various reasons, and this complainant has taken issue with that. And Mr. Chair, after discussing this last month, what your instruction to me was to do a few things. One was to provide the board with security policies.
Now that's item 134, is it not?
Oh, sorry.
I think 133.
133 may be just about the grant.
Oh, I'm sorry, 133 is security.
Yeah.
I apologize.
They all bleed together a bit. One kind of folds into the other. But you did ask me, related to the security protocol, to provide to the board the city's policies and procedures around security so that you could take a look at them and how they are applied to not only visitors, but to employees as well. So I have that. So if the board wanted to handle that issue first before proceeding on to the CIRC process, perhaps that's how you want to do it.
Sure.
Okay.
That sounds fine. Mr. Sims, let us finish and then I'll recognize you. So this first issue, 133, has to do with Mr. Sims' access to city buildings being limited.
That was part of it, and then it traces back several complaints to like 131, which was closed. So also what this complainant did was basically appeal prior closure of his matters that aren't reflected here on the sheet, but that I summarized last time. That he'd had other complaints about having difficulty accessing city staff to set up meetings. So the board had dealt with that and closed that. They'd closed a few of those. This complainant had an issue with how the complaints were characterized, and then it all culminated with the security restrictions. So he basically in 133 appealed the prior closures and then added on the allegations related to access. I think that's accurate.
And then 134 expands on that?
134 talks about how his proposal for his program was handled and restates some of the other allegations about how his other complaints were investigated. But I believe 134 deals more specifically with the recommendation from this committee to not recommend his project go forward.
Okay. Let me remind everybody, Mr. Sims is perhaps has been involved in the beginnings of a program and has a vision of an expansion of that program, perhaps the most passionate person I've ever talked to privately about his feelings about this particular program and what it could do. For a while he had, as I understand it, ex-convicts washing city vehicles. That it was not his ultimate goal. I believe his ultimate goal was to have a program targeted to some of the high crime, very low income areas of the city and getting people meaningful jobs that would pay more than minimum wage and have a little bit more stability. And building on something that would in his view, become self-funding, or at least have a large enough corpus that it would just continue to grow and provide services. So it's, in his view, it's anti-crime, it's back to work, it's a whole variety of things. He had a contract with the city. That contract got canceled. He has subsequently submitted proposals for funding and feels that the city has, I'm kind of speaking for you here, Mr. Sims, feels the city has moved the goalposts as he has tried to submit proposals and modified proposals, has support from a number of people in the community, professional people in the community for his bigger vision. Feels that he has not been taken seriously or potentially even blackballed in a sense. And in all of that, in our prior discussions, we have struggled to find, regardless of what our individual or personal feelings may be about it, we have struggled to find something within our jurisdiction which would pretty much have to be the misuse of public position. No elected or appointed official shall corruptly use or attempt to use his official position to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for themselves or others valued at more than $25. That's the kind of box we have to shoehorn Mr. Sims' complaints into. So, Mr. Sims, with a completely inadequate introduction to you, I'm going to recognize you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to say that I really appreciate the care and the concern and the words that you have said. Here is, I understand through great education through Ms. Julie Keefe and the meeting I just had with your chairman that your powers are very restricted. And I do understand that. And even Mr. Cecil, you dropped some very hard truth on me the last time when you said if we was in, not with me, but the ticket situation, it's just a hard truth. And I get that. But I also see that there is also another hard truth, that a city manager has a responsibility to be objective when it comes to taxpayer dollars. And I believe that the city manager is not being objective and using his power as a mechanism to kill this program and to approach upon my civil rights. It has already been demonstrated. There was supposed to be a new system that you go through, the CHSP process. The chairman had given direction for you all to get the policies on that. Well, the city manager is not following the new system. At the last city commission meeting, there was a nonprofit organization who took the express lane, never filled out that information that I share with you all. So that is an abuse of power, where you are making one person do one thing and you're doing another. When it comes to the security measures, I believe that when you go to the extreme of alleging that top management, Cynthia Barber, alleged that I threatened her and her husband right down to the crime scene where a big important developer breached security for almost 2 hours and nothing happened to him. We're talking about abuse of power. A letter was written by the chief of police who is over security, but was denied by the city manager because this guy is politically connected. When I come to you, Colonel Grant, and I tell you that I was told, if you have a soldier, my son is graduating, and my son comes up to you and tells you that the sergeant has said that he's threatening, that it has alleged that I'm threatening him and his wife or spouse, and you know me, you don't handle it like this. I did not even know on April 26th, after the March of Restoration of Rights, I got this email. And so I'm so confused. I'm standing down at the back gate, tears in my eyes. I don't know if you've ever experienced when a man just steps on your dream. or your purpose for getting up every morning. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it hurts. So I'm standing down there with tears in my eyes. The security guard comes. I tell him I'm not a threat. I just want to see Cynthia. The city manager, the city attorney comes down, talks to me. The police shows up. The interim city manager comes down, Mr. Cecil, and when I extended my hand to him, he jumped back as if I had leprosy. Would not even shake my hand, but I'm here supposing to think that he can make objective decisions on a man's project whose hand he can't shake. I walk away. I pull the police report from the Tallahassee police report. There is nothing in that police report, Mr. Holloman, that says that I threatened anyone, that I was a disturbance, that I did anything. Then I'm at home because I have a heart condition, bed rest. I get a telephone call from Carol Dixon, a city employee, that tells me because of my actions on yesterday, I am no longer allowed into City Hall except for these type public meetings. And if I have to meet with someone, there's a special designated room that Miss Julie and Mr. Richard said that we have to meet in. So when I asked her from my bed why of this, she told me, I asked her, can you send me a letter? She said, I'll have to call you back. So she calls me back, Mr. Grant, and tells me that she cannot give me a letter informing me how my civil liberties are being restricted. So I get nervous because I see $900 million coming after me that set me up. I see police officers under this man's control who are sworn officers who could pull me over at any time and take me to jail. Ask me, has it happened? Yes. I've been falsely arrested right off of Park Avenue. So I called Sheriff Walt McNeil and make him aware of this situation, that I am afraid for my safety. The next day, Chief Gaines calls me and he arranged a meeting for me at the Lucky Goat because he wanted me to meet at the CDA, but I was afraid, Mr. Davis. I have the emails to prove it. He said, well, that's city and county. I said, no, I would, until I get an understanding, I'd rather meet you at a common location. It was at that location, Chief Gaines informed me for the very first time that the reason these additional restrictions were made was because I had allegedly threatened Cynthia Barber and her husband. But Cynthia did not mention that to the sheriff that came when I called them here when I felt unsafe. That wasn't mentioned there. I had to go out to the sheriff department, talk to Chief Butler at the sheriff's office, and have her to do an addendum to the report so it'll be conclusive. Because if you would have read just these 2 pages, you would have thought that Cynthia Barber called the police on me for a disturbance. And so here we have a gentleman that violates security for 2.5 hours. I violated for 3.5 minutes. I get followed around for 50-some days in City Hall. I go down to the back gate and stand, and now the repercussions are even greater. Now, Mr. Davis, I'm a little stupid and I'm a little crazy, but I've been to prison, and the last thing you want to do is show your butt when you got the city attorney standing right there. So, in your thing, it said if it smells, the impropriety, the abuse of power, it's demonstrating on both ends. Ms. McNeil, look at the process. He's not even stopping putting people into the express lane. It's still going on. It happened at the last commission meeting. A group went to the express lane, and Commissioner Curtis Richardson said, whoa. But Scott Maddox and Nancy Miller, they was pushing it, even though they won't talk with me. The security measures. In this here report, it says that I've been going to female offices without permission. Well, for the last 50 days, I've been escorted by the police, by the security here in the building. So how could that occur? Or did Miss Barbara think of something that happened way back and added and said, oh yeah, I forgot. You know, because I get a little touchy, Mr. Smith, when my mama done spanked me for one thing, and then she'll come back and say, oh yeah, I remember what you did 2 weeks ago. Let me come back and spank you again. This is in the area of abuse of power. And I'm asking, I'm praying that you see that this does not smell right. And all I'm asking you to do is to follow up with what the chairman had asked you to do. The chairman asked you to have the city to give you the policies and the procedures, Mr. Holloman, on how does a organization get funded. What are the decisions that makes a project goes to the fast lane or the slow lane? What are the security protocols that restricts a man's civil liberties? Because to me, it wasn't until FDLE, Colonel Grant, that I went to them that the city would furnish me a letter. I was told, it's best you remember and don't make a mistake. It's when the FDLE got involved, then they decided to give me a letter telling me how my civil liberties, and it's just so, and they don't say what I did. It just says because of your incident on the 26th. So in other words, because on April 26th, after I left a rally for restoration of rights, I stood down there, and because of that, now I'm no longer they can't call me. I can have no conversations over the phones. They can only talk to me through email or conference. But I haven't been given a justification. Now, what I'm finna say now is just really wrong. But I'm gonna say it. We wonder now why people think black lives don't matter. Independent living facility in Southwood, 20 acres. Conservative estimated value, $3.5 million. You know what 20 acres are over in Southwood Prime? To the top 10 people of the highest in this city. And then you turn down $331 for people of black or color that looks like me, that gives them fair wage jobs. I don't care how you twist it. I don't care how you turn it. It stinks. And I'm asking this board. Mr. Holloman, you said that it brings light to these situations. You might can't do anything, but I'm asking you to keep the light on this situation. Don't close my case, because if you close my case, it goes into the dark. And you empower my adversary. Every time, Mr. Holloman, I have come before this board, he has attacked me. I came before you the first time. The next week, he stopped us from washing cars. I came before you the second time. He put this sanction on me that an officer has to follow me all the way around. I came before you the third time. Now, I'm being accused of threatening folks. Please don't turn the light off on me. Thank you.
Okay, members, I see two issues here. One is an issue that we've dealt with before, and that is the city's unwillingness to fund Mr. Sims' program. And the other is the issue of his limited access or closed access to this building. And I guess the issue for us as a board is, do either of those fit within our jurisdiction on misuse of position? I'm seeing expressions of concern, but Mr. Davis, you look like you're closest to talking.
I'm just trying to think. I'm looking back at the ordinance provisions we added and discussed already about misuse of position and how that's defined, where an elected or appointed official would misuse their position and secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for themselves valued at more than $25. But what happens if an official misuses their position, not to gain any money, but just what if, and I'm just talking hypothetically here, what if a appointed or elected official misuses their position because they're biased against a person or group? What's the remedy? Obviously, voters can vote, but that seems to be unethical too. Why wouldn't there be a provision that would be stronger than what we have?
I think you're suggesting adding something to our list of possible recommendations concerning expansion of our jurisdiction.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
I know of
Meadows Keefe will do it.
I know of friends from other countries where there was so much corruption, and how much they appreciate our country's freedoms and system that's so much better. But the difficulties they had through their years there, when elected or appointed officials just simply had no regard for honesty and fairness and decency, why wouldn't we have a provision to deal with that?
All right. I think we've got another item for our list. It occurs to me, Ms. Meadows Keefe, we might also want to put on the list, since our recommendations are not just about, in the past, have not just been about the jurisdiction of this board, but have also been about city policies that would relate to ethics, something about consistency in grant application, the grant application and award process. I realize the city does grants for a wide variety of things, and there would need to be some flexibility in how they would consider those. Some might be for critical government services, and others might be for downtown beautification or something that would be a different consideration, but still there ought to be some, it seems to me, and there may be, I don't know, but it seems like there ought to be consistency in, for the public or the potential recipient groups.
The applicants, right. What about disposing of this matter?
Okay, so we've got again, I perceive two issues. Is there anybody here who, Dr. Grant?
Yes, sir. I got a couple comments. And as sympathetic as I am to people who have seemed like they have been treated unfairly, it just appears to me that this is not an ethics issue. Some people, if they get no for an answer, don't like to take no. I think the remedy may be back through the city commission or some other place, but I just would caution this board to be careful that we don't start accepting all kinds of complaints about things that aren't within our jurisdiction. And frankly, this one doesn't seem to be. I understand the issue, and I've talked to the ethics officer about this to get some more background. And my understanding is that, if there's a program that isn't going to be renewed or whatever, that's certainly not ours. And then if there are repercussions from that because of actions that individuals take, that's certainly not ours either. So I'm just concerned that we not broaden our jurisdiction to something where maybe it doesn't belong. And sometimes people need to hear the hard truth. To me, this is the hard truth in this one. I signed up for this ethics board because I believe that I could make a contribution to help, in conjunction with the rest of the board, decide on things that are ethical or not. And frankly, in my opinion, aimed at those elected and appointed officials in positions of leadership. But when you have other issues that are not specifically ethical, but this becomes a forum for those, I just don't think this is really the appropriate forum. I do appreciate the board's indulgence and listening, but I find myself at the end of patience with this one because I just don't think there's an ethical issue for us to decide. If I did, I'd jump on it like a chicken on a June bug, but I'm not. So that's my 2 cents. I do understand, we'll take it under advisement and all that, but I'm just kind of cutting through the fog to get to the bottom, which doesn't seem to me to be an ethical issue. So that's all I've got.
Mr. Sims.
I think, Mr. Grant, I think that what you've overlooking is not the answer of no to the process. That's not my appeal. My problem is how I was told no and how we got to the no. It's unfair when you say you want to make the ethic board is supposed to be here to ensure that everyone has a level playing field. And so, and maybe that's where we need additional education is, because if the city of Tallahassee can give benefits to certain people and restrict them from other folks, then that's unfortunate. I thought that the ethics board here is to make sure that people's civil liberties are not being affected, and to make sure that everyone is being treated fair and that there is not a level of corruption here. And so for you to take my situation and reduce it down to just I'm upset because they said no to my program, that is a real poor analogy, because what you have not added to that, they said no to my program, but they also made me jump through 5-6 hoops that no other person has jumped through, and you don't find a problem with that. You don't find an issue of ethics where I was giving a hard, long road to no, where other nonprofit organizations are now continuously, has not stopped, are giving an easy road. And I'm just so disappointed that all the work that Mr. Holloman and his family has done for the equal rights and civil rights of this, he finds no words to say on this. I can't tell you the disappointment in my heart right now.
Other comments? Questions? Okay, is there anybody who then objects to closing these issues? Okay, without objections. And Mr. Sims, I'm going to say one more time that it is not a lack of concern for your issues. It is a matter of the fact that your issues do not fit within our jurisdiction. that limits what this board can do. Moving on to item 135, Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
And you probably have a speaker card for this person. I think he probably filled out a speaker card. Our substitute counsel is not,
Yeah, that's it.
that's it.
Dr. Hollifield, you'll be up here. We're on your issue.
okay. And this complaint, again, is hearkening back to a prior complaint, 2018-125, that the board closed on January 16th, 2018. There is a non-city-owned facility in the CRA district that received CRA funding that has, the CEO of that organization has banned this complainant from the premises, as well as at least one other individual. So initially, this complainant came to the board saying that he did not feel it appropriate that that should occur based on the fact that it got CRA dollars and holds itself out to be open to the public. Why he's here today, to the best of my knowledge, is he passed out a flyer advertising a community health fair that was held at this facility, and it was co-sponsored by the city and billed as free and open to the public. And he disputes that being an accurate representation if he's banned, and he asked the city attorney to opine on whether or not, if he appeared at that facility, whether or not he would be arrested. And the city attorney did answer the question, but did not provide a yes or no, because it would depend on different factors. So that is basically what his complaint is about, and the actions I took were, again, speaking extensively with the complainant, speaking with various officials, reviewing previous correspondence, and the recommendation is to close.
Okay, members, you have in front of you the one page that's color, that is printed in color ink, that Ms. Meadows-Keefe referred to. Dr. Hollifield, you're recognized, sir.
Dr. Hollifield, Longleaf Court. Just a little background. I grew up in Tallahassee. Went to segregated FAMU High. Became a physician, even though Roxanne Manning refuses to call me doctor. But let's get something straight. This is important. We had a civil rights movement in Tallahassee. People went to jail. People got beat up by the police. I was beat up by the police in the past, but that's not the issue. The issue is that the civil rights movement, and pardon my allergies, I can barely talk, but the civil rights movement was never about lunch counters. No, it was never about black people are able to eat hamburgers next to white people. You know, we didn't care about eating hamburgers next to white people. Not really. That was a diversion. That was made the issue. But that was a false issue. It was never about that. I was on an all-black swimming team here in Tallahassee. State Street. We competed against other black teams all over the area. And when the city didn't want black kids swimming with white kids, they closed all the swimming pools. Mine too. Closed them all. We didn't care about swimming with no white people, but they closed them all. So my contention is this. I've already been banned from healthcare facilities. And you need to keep that in mind, because CarePoint is a healthcare facility. It has life-saving capability. And I've been banned from CarePoint for life. And it's not just me. Anybody Rob Renzi doesn't like, he'll ban. Sylvia Hubbard, 60-year-old grandmama. She been banned. She can't take her kids there. But I'm saying the issue was never about hamburgers. TMH, one of the most racist institutions in Tallahassee, banned me for 17 years, 1948 to 1965. They said, look, black people, you can't come into this hospital. Even though black people built the hospital, it's a city-owned hospital. Black people had to pay a utilities tax just like everybody else. But unlike everybody else, they told black people, all right, you done given us this money to build a segregated hospital, but you can't come here. So I was banned from TMH for 17 years. And the racism was, at TMH was more like the racism in South Africa, apartheid South Africa. You could go, when my dad needed urgent surgery, he had to leave Tallahassee and go to Thomasville. Not because Thomasville loved Negroes, but they had Archibald Hospital. And Archibald would at least admit black people. They wouldn't just let them die, unlike TMH. But Archibald would admit them and put them on a segregated ward. But at least treat them. And that's how my daddy survived the abject, inhumane racism that comes when a medical facility bans black people. So it's my contention that Big Ben Cares is taking up where Tallahassee Memorial left off. Big Ben Cares bans black people that they don't like. They ban them. A healthcare facility. Suppose Sylvia Hubbard needed emergency care, or one of her great-grandchildren, whatever, needed emergency care. She can't go to Big Ben Cares, or that's the question that I ask. You need to look at this. City of Tallahassee event. If I'm looking at this correct, it says free and open to the public. You can get blood pressure check, cholesterol check, diabetes check. You can get all that evaluated at this healthcare export. So the question that I asked Julie and the question that I asked Attorney Jackson is, if I had showed up at that expo, which the city of Tallahassee advertises as free and open to the public. Am I reading this correct? Does it say free and open to the public? Or does it mean free and open to the public if Rob Renzi will allow you to come? But what I told Attorney Jackson, I said, look, you know, you got to answer this question that I ask. And the question that I ask is an event that's advertised by the city, and you can see it down here, advertised by the city, as free and open to the public, can they deny public access? Then can Rob Renzi say, or can the city of Tallahassee say, yeah, it's free and open to the public, but people that certain members of the city, you know, the city power structure despises, they can't go there, even though they're members of the public. You can't have it both ways, people. You can't say it's free and open to the public and then deny members of the public. You cannot have it both ways. So what I'm telling this august body is that if Rob Renzi and CarePoint is going to deny access to a medical facility that the public, they put that building, that monstrosity right across the street from where I grew up. I used to walk the segregated family high right across the street from there. So a white man from Leadership, Tallahassee, puts up a building in the middle of the black community and tells black people that he doesn't like, look, I'm a white man from Leadership, Tallahassee. Y'all can't come here. And this expo was April 14th, 2018. That's how far backwards we have come. So what I am saying is that if the city advertises an event as free and open to the public, it's an outright lie if it allows it to be held at CarePoint, which denies access to certain members of the public for these blood pressure screenings, cholesterol screenings, diabetes screenings. Sylvia Hubbard, a 60-year-old great-grandmama, can't go there for that. So you have no right to advertise this as free and open to the public. And it's my contention that the city of Tallahassee should never allow or never advertise an event at CarePoint as it did here, because to do so is an absolute lie. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hollifield. Question, Ms. Smith.
Was there a trespass order against him? Why were you banned? Or is it anything?
That's an interesting story. What happened was they had a ribbon cutting. They had a ribbon cutting on October 26th. And I showed up for the ribbon cutting, and Rob Renzi said, call the police on me. And that's another thing. Why do white people love to call the police on black people so often? Rob Renzi has called the Tallahassee police on me 2 times within a 6-month period. The first time was on May 10th at TCC. He called the police on me or threatened to call the police on me, and his rationale was to say, well, you didn't register for this conference at TCC. And what was the conference? I've been concerned about all these black babies dying from, well, my first letter to the editor was 2004, in which I wrote a letter to the editor saying black babies in Leon County die at a rate 53% higher than the state average. So I've been concerned about black infant mortality. This conference was United Partnership for Human Services. Rob Renzi is on the board. I go to the damn meeting. Rob Renzi starts yelling at me and says, unless you register, I'm going to call the cops. Unless you register, I'm going to call the cops. You think he would ever say that to a white physician? No. But it's open season on black folks in terms of calling the police. So this was May 10th, 2017, the first time he threatened to call the cops on me because he said I wasn't registered. So what Renzi didn't know was the executive director, Ellen, I can never pronounce her last name, Pikowaski or something like that. She had invited me to the conference. I didn't say a word to Renzi. I ignored him. But he didn't know that the executive director for the United Partners for Human Services had invited me to the meeting. I didn't have to register. But he thought I hadn't registered, and because he was a white man from Leadership Tallahassee, he thought he had every right to call the cops on me. Threatened to call the cops on me. So the next time was October 26th, as there was ribbon cutting at Big Ben Cares. And when I showed up, I was met by 2 Tallahassee policemen who threatened to arrest me. And they said, you know, they don't want you here. This is an invitation-only event at a ribbon cutting. You think Renzi would have ever called the police on a white physician who showed up for a ribbon cutting? No. But I tell you what the real issue is. You have to ask, are we just dealing here with abject racism? And that's why he says, you can't come here. Is that the issue? But there were some black people there. So that can't be the only issue. Because, you know, there were other black people. Maybe it's outspoken black people. Or is it the fact that I went to DEP from nobody, when nobody from this city government would point out all them contaminants that they had on that Care Point property when they were building it. They had stuff on there I could barely pronounce. Benzoapyrene on the Care Point property. Chromium in levels sufficient to contaminate the groundwater. So nobody from the city had called DEP and told them all that stuff was on there. But I called DEP. I called the county. Nobody from the county had called them. Nobody from the city had called them. I called them and provided them with all that evidence from their own environmental survey saying that the land was contaminated with benzoapyrene, chromium, and all kinds of other shit I can't even pronounce. To my shock and amazement, the Florida DEP said, yeah, Hollifield. I'll say Hollifield because Roxanne Manning won't call me Dr. Hollifield.
Thank you.
They said, yeah, you got a point. They looked at the chromium levels. They looked at the benzoapyrene and said, you got to report. This is the first we've heard of this. No, ain't nobody reported it. So what happened? I'll tell you what happened. DEP shut them down. They shut them down. They said, instead of dealing with some of this stuff, y'all just spread it around. And they were mad as hell. They never told me they were mad as hell, but I know they shut them down. DEP. And they told them, y'all going to clean this stuff up before you proceed. So I cost him money. I cost Big Ben Cares money. I cost Rob Renzi money, or at least his organization. So the question is the police in Tallahassee being used as an instrument of racism? I think maybe it's outspoken. Maybe Renzi don't like outspoken black people. Maybe that's it. Or are the police being used as an instrument of retaliation? Because that costs CarePoint money. And the response that I got back from Attorney Jackson and from Julie was completely unsatisfactory. Attorney Jackson in particular said, well, this is a public matter between you and CarePoint. Now, maybe people think I'm stupid because I went to segregated FAMU High, but I tell you, we had some good teachers at segregated FAMU High. We had some very good teachers. I don't have no law degree, but I do know this. If the police come after you, it's no longer a private matter. It ain't private when you're confronted by two members of the TPD saying if you don't leave the property, you're going to get arrested. So I think that response that I got from Cassandra Jackson and Julie, that it's a private matter. And I say Julie because we go back a ways.
Thank you.
But if the Tallahassee police involvement are involved, I tell you, it ain't a private matter. It's a public matter. And again, my position is, if the city of Tallahassee advertises an event as free and open to the public, then it should not be held at CarePoint.
Thanks, Dr.
Because
Howard.
that would be an absolute lie.
Mr. Smith, anything else?
No.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, sir?
It got me there. Thank you.
So I think, once again, we're in a situation where, regardless of our feelings about this individual issue, the question is there anything here that is, taking the allegation on its face, is there anything that is within our jurisdiction, would again have to fall under Section 2-6 of the City Ethics Code?
I don't see it.
I'm seeing heads going side to side, and in my case, some rocks rattling. Okay, Dr. Hollifield, I think we appreciate your concerns, but again, within the authority that this board has, you haven't told us anything that falls within what we can adjudicate. Because here's the language that we have. No elected or appointed official shall corruptly use his or her official position to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for himself or herself. That's what we have to work with. So I'm sure you can argue that a couple of your case falls within a couple of those points, but it doesn't fall within all of them. At least that seems to be the expression I'm seeing from the board members. So I think we've closed this once in the past. Unless a board member sees a path on which we can move forward. And I'm seeing shaking heads. I think we're going to close it again. So everyone in favor of closing this, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. That moves us to the monthly budget report, which looks the same. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, anything on here we need to know about that's different?
There's nothing of any particular interest at this point. I just did want to highlight quickly dates that the board needs to be aware of in terms of the city's budget process, which we do follow. And that is that the budget workshop and tentative millage approval is June 6th. The third quarter budget updates July 11th. The first public hearing for the fiscal year 19 budget approval is September 12th, and the final second public hearing is September the 26th. And again, we are holding to what we asked for last year for 2019, and so far I haven't had any indication of any issue with that.
Okay, any questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe on the budget? The next item on the agenda is our blue sky list of possible recommendations. I think you have it. I know, we're getting to it.
Okay.
I saw that before. We've added several. I encourage you, again, if there is anything that comes out of any meeting or comes out of any discussion you have, or just an idea that falls on your head in between meetings, call Julie. She will add it to this list. At some point in the fairly near future, we're going to start ticking through this list to come up with possible recommendations to the city concerning its policies, to the city concerning our jurisdiction, or to ourselves concerning our policies for operating. The next item on the list is the list of public records that were requested from the city treasurer clerk's office, and then the subset of those that Ms. Meadows-Keefe is tracking. And on this issue, I think I'm going to recognize Mr. Wilcox. Is this where you want to speak? I thought this is going to hit your issue. If I'm wrong, just tell me so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I actually wanted to speak to the, what was it, item 220 in the...
I'm so sorry.
On the complaints, but that's all right. I wanted just to start by thanking you and the members of the board for your service. I think, you know, we all see that it's really important, you know, for there to be a forum for Dr. Hollifield and some of the previous speakers to bring issues, you know, to the board about the city and the way it's treating its citizens. So I just wanted to again thank you for your patience and willingness to serve. As far as the resolution of the complaint involving the tickets, we fully support your recommendations, Chair Herring, and especially, I think I heard you say you asked Julie to do some kind of an investigation into how many other employees received tickets and to what other games tickets were received. I think it's, you know, whether or not you can, and you also said that you were going to have a letter come forth from the board to city staff expressing your concerns. I think both of those are good remedies, and especially the direction to do the investigation, because you know, I don't want to see any other city employees lose their jobs, or I don't want to see people penalized or fined. But I do think we need to know the truth of what happened and how this, you know, lobbyist in question was trying to obtain, you know, access and influence through these free tickets. So that concludes my comments, and thank you again.
Okay. I apologize for not calling you at the right point. I was thinking you were going to want to talk about something slightly different. So we are on, again, Julie, you want to talk about, we have two lists, a big list of the public records requests that have been received by the city treasurer clerk's office. That's like 6 pages maybe. And then a subset of that list that is on 1 page that you've labeled as yours.
So I don't have any particular comment about any particular request, but I just want to remind the board members and the audience members that the one list with the redactions is a tracking of all the public records requests that have been received since the last meeting. And then there is a separate list that goes out to city leadership. Particular people are alerted to these, so that's the reason for the two separate lists. Other than that, I have no additional comments.
Anybody have any comments or questions on these public records requests?
I have a question.
Dr. Grant?
What are we looking for here?
The idea, we started doing this a couple months ago with the idea being that since we have the ability to self-initiate complaints, that we need sources of information for that, and that in public records requests made of the city, there might be some things that would rise to the level of a potential ethics concern. So I think probably looking at the short list, I know Julie sent us a newspaper article clipping in which Mr. Wilcox was quoted. This is actually what I thought you were going to be talking about, on the use of the parking passes at the city airport by elected officials, and whether or not that was appropriate. And to be real honest, I don't know enough about those parking. I don't know whether parking passes are a perk or whether they are job related, intending to only to reimburse you for when you're at the city airport on city business, whether they're considered gifts or whether they're considered a part of employment. I don't know any of that stuff, and the newspaper article did not address it. But it seems to me that topics like that might be things that would get some attention here.
That's in 29.
Well, it's in several of these. I think there's at least 3 that hit that specific issue of parking permits, the use of parking pass from the airport. I don't know who gives it. Does the airport give it, or does the city give it? And does the city pay I don't know how parking at the airport works. Is that a city revenue, or is that a revenue of the airport?
I don't know enough about the airport to say. I just know that when you go out there sometimes for a meeting on city business, your parking can get validated. You'd get a ticket like you do at Clyman, and it gets validated for the time you're there. I don't know the difference between that and this, so I have not looked into that.
Well, let's do this. Since there are some unanswered questions there, could we ask Julie just to get some background information on how parking at the airport works for city employees and city officials, and how parking passes work? Since if Mr. Wilcox is concerned, I'm concerned. And apparently I do get to recognize Mr. Wilcox on this issue.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. It's too bad, Jeff Schweers, the reporter who was here earlier, he I think, wrote the story that was in the Democrat. And the way he explained it to me, the airport authority gives the city commission and the mayor, as well as the president of FSU and the president of FAMU, parking passes. I think the issue with the mayor comes down to his use of the parking pass for campaign travel. He used the parking pass at a far higher frequency than any other member of the city commission, and he's been doing a lot of campaign travel. And my comment, to the Democrat was that city officials need to draw a bright line between their public business and their personal or campaign business, and it appeared that perhaps Mayor Gillum had allowed that line to become blurred.
Okay.
So that's kind of the situation.
So if the pass, though, could be used for any purpose,
yes,
and it's given by the airport, does that make the pass a gift? I don't know. Anyway, Julie's going to get some background information for us.
So I will.
We don't know anything about.
What I will do is use that as the ethics moment for next month, if that is suitable. That way it's something directly applicable and won't take a lot of time, and I will amass all the information I can on the parking passes.
All right.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody? Since that seems to be a topical issue, and if there's at least 3 public records requests on it, I suspect we're going to hear more. We are on item 3G.
Well, I already talked about that actually in my
Okay,
report.
you covered that.
So we are on a break now.
Okay, we are going to take a 15-minute break. We will be back in whatever 15 minutes, at 5 after. We are back. We are on item 5, our ethics moment. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, you're recognized.
Yeah, we're going to go fast through these, but the first one was just more interesting than like our normal case law, that ethics and corruption does not just exist in government. It also, surprise, surprise, exists in college sports. I know no one is surprised about that, but I found this interesting that there are reforms being proposed for the NCAA, and arrests had been made based on coaches being bribed to steer players to particular sports agents, financial advisors, and apparel companies. And various people weighed in on the utility of the various recommendations being made, i.e. one and done, freshman eligibility, all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the corporate sponsorship of the various tournaments that the high schoolers play in to get recruited, and also that seemingly the universities make a great deal of money from the players, but yet are not allowed to share in that largesse. So it was an interesting discussion about corruption and conflicts of interest in the college sports setting. The next one is actually more serious, and it comes from the appellate court on the Commission on Ethics, and this case had to do with a departing city attorney. It was not here. This was in the city of Northport. Around about the time this particular city attorney was going to be leaving, there was some commission action to create a zone hearing officer and a code enforcement special magistrate. That conveniently, this particular attorney was qualified to staff. So as he was leaving, these two entities were established, and he was hired to adjudicate and work on both of these boards as a hearing officer and a magistrate. So there were 2 counts filed against him. One has to do actually with the corrupt intent that we talk about all the time, and whether this was done with corrupt intent. And the Commission on Ethics did believe that that occurred, and the appellate court agreed that he knew or should have known that advising the city commission as city attorney on a matter benefiting himself was inconsistent with his public duties as a city attorney. So he basically utilized that to get business for himself. The second part was whether there was an inappropriate referral to the firm where he works, and the appellate court disagreed with the Ethics Commission, who believed that it was an inappropriate referral and representation by that firm in front of the body where this city attorney worked, and that there was like a dual representation problem with that. The appellate court was not persuaded and thought that the word client was too broadly construed. So they took that count and reversed it, but they did agree on the corrupt intent count. So,
So on corruptly, it's really in paragraphs under the 2A heading,
yes,
beginning on the second page.
right.
That is really important to us because of our ordinance. And the sentence I like is, case law has construed this provision, the corruptly language, to require proof that the respondent acted with reasonable notice that his or her conduct was inconsistent with the proper performance of his or her public duties and would be a violation of law or the code of ethics.
Right.
So that potentially is a less narrow reading of what corruptly means than some of us have feared in terms of
Right.
the jurisdiction of this board. So I think that's good news for us.
And there
Judge
is,
Weatherall does another sage opinion.
and there is a case too that says the corrupt intent can be formed instantaneously, that it doesn't have to be plotted out in advance. So you're correct on that, Mr. Chair. So those two items conclude the ethics moment.
Comments or questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe? Seeing none. Next item is item 6, and this is in the introduction to the bylaws. This was I think the recommendation of Mr. Currington that we remove the word abuse because it is not in the charter amendment.
And this is the second reading for that, so.
So any comments, concerns about this? Okay, so this will be our permanent change. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. So that is approved. The next two under item 7 are revisions to bylaws. Now, these are is our first look at these or second?
No, this is the second look at.
Okay, this is second look, I'm sorry.
And this one reflects the process by which the ethics officer may be discharged, and then how a subsequent ethics officer would be hired.
Okay, so we talked about this at the last meeting. Remember, the one kind of outstanding issue we had was this has 2/3 vote all the way through, which is going 2/3 of 7 is 5, 2/3 of 6 members is 4, 2/3 of 5 members is also 4, and 2/3 of 4 members is 3. So it's in a small body, it's an extraordinary vote, but it would be a vote of confidence in whoever we would hire. Excuse me, or remove if we were to remove the ethics officer without cause. So, any comments, concerns, questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. And that is approved.
One more.
And the last one is in Article 9A, 7A.
Right, and Mr. Chair, this one, if you recall, was on first reading last time as well, and this reflects the concern that some had about the investigation of employee issues by management, and will allow the board to direct the ethics officer to investigate the matter, or to have an investigation conducted by a third party, again, as directed by the board.
Okay, so this, yes, sir.
I just have a comment or question about this, and I apologize for it may be backing us up a little bit, but I was at something the other day, and one of the things we had to do was an icebreaker thing, and they asked us what's your pet peeve? And one of my pet peeves is the Oxford comma. And I'm afraid that we may need a comma not in the blue part, but in the black part here. In A, it says that we shall report to the employee's supervisor, comma, the appropriate appointed official or assistant city manager and human resources director. I think there's probably a comma after city manager that would make that sentence make sense to me.
Got it.
Would you want to add the word "to" between and human resources? So it would report to supervisor or city manager and to human resources director, just to be even more Oxford about it?
That would be that'd be more better.
Be more better.
Okay, so with those two small changes, something we talked about last month, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, and that one is approved. As we do every month, anything that anybody wants to see on the June agenda or some other future agenda? We've already got a few things we've identified tonight as issues. Our attorney have anything for us? No, we haven't stepped in anything too badly? All right. Public comment on non-agenda items or on anything you want to comment on. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you very much. Did anyone here happen to see the May 9th City Commission meeting? One? Okay. What transpired, and we've been talking about how the public's ability to speak at a city commission meeting has been thwarted by the mayor and a couple of the other city commissioners. And I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if you could have our Julie get a copy of the video of my presentation, 3-minute presentation, and look at it before our next meeting. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. I was going to plug it in. But the point being, I came in here, put a video. I called it a public service announcement. There's a picture of Scott Maddox. The folks in my office, pretty talented, so they put him in a costume of prison costume. And I was playing a song, and the song was "I Fought the Law, and the Law Won." 1964-68 song. And then I was going to make a few comments. Once it was turned on, now keep in mind, I came in here an hour early to make sure it's on the computer properly. I sat here for 2 hours patiently in my seat in the front. So I've been here for 3 hours in order to speak for 3 minutes. I put the video on. I start to talk. Within 5 seconds during my 3-minute presentation, our mayor starts asking the attorney if he has to listen to me. What can we do to stop Jackson from speaking? Do we have to listen to this? Can we stop him from showing this video? Now, what happens, my understanding, if I come up here, and the picture was actually the front page, it was on of Scott Maddox, it was on the front page of the newspaper, so as far as it wasn't, it was acceptable for the front page of the Democrat, then it's acceptable being here. My understanding is I can come here and I can speak on almost any topic during the unagended for 3 minutes. And if that's a problem, then I think that Gillum, by him getting engaged with the city attorney, and when you speak on that microphone, what happens, it silences this, but definitely terminates the sound from the TV back here. So he kept talking for 30 seconds until the video was over, because then you wouldn't hear it. Now, the second thing that he did, and I think this is clearly not only unethical, I think it's criminal, and I think we're going to find out if it's criminal. As I've told you in the past, when I present something here on the TV screen, Gillum, our mayor, has instructed the media folks in the background to not show anything that I put up here on the screen to the public. If I had that picture, the 20 people tonight, these 4 or 5, plus you folks, 5 of us would be able to see what I'm presenting. No one, it was cut from my presentation so you could hear me speaking, and then they would go ahead and not allow the public to see what I'm saying now, or see my presentation. So if they're going to prevent me from sharing information with the public, whether they like it or not, that's a serious problem. What I'd like to see is this board, after you and do your investigation, find out why my information is not being shared when I come up here to speak with the public. I think we need to have some direction given to the mayor and the entire city commission. Second, after Gillum got done speaking, Nancy Miller said, yeah, I agree with that, Mayor. I'd like to know why they allow people to walk in off the street and use our microphone and our video equipment. Well, I couldn't stand it. I'm sitting back there, and they'd already ripped me off. I get 3 minutes. Gillum spoke for 1, so I figured I still got a minute yet left. So I come up, I get the microphone. I said, Nancy, let me explain this to you. This isn't your microphone. This is not your video equipment. This is not your building. It's a Publix. And I pay more than enough in property taxes to at least pay for this little thing, and I'm going to use it. Well, Curtis Richardson, he pops up. He says, I think there has to be something wrong when Jackson comes in and accuses us of criminal activity. Only thing I told Curtis Richardson, I don't think he's done anything criminal. But I did say, if a person looks the other way when plenty of crimes are going on, and you continue to tell the public that you can't see the clouds of corruption, Curtis, then you're as bad as everybody else. And I firmly believe that. So those are two issues that I think my First Amendment rights are destroyed. And once you see it, I think you'll be as outraged as I am. So if that needs to be a complaint, then mark it down as a complaint. I think the city commission, if you folks believe that a public citizen has a right to come here and address you as quietly and politely as a person can, not always agreeing with what I say, but you got to agree that I have the right to say it, and they, being the city commission, don't have to like it. All they have to do is sit there with their mouth shut and say thank you very much. Now I'm under their skin, and they're a little bit nervous about the 1st of June, but the one guy that didn't say a single word through the entire presentation was Scott Maddox. And it was his face that was up there. But he has bigger issues to deal with. If you can look into that, I think it's atrocious. And if Julie would email you just that 3-minute, it would be, I think, horrifying. So thank you very much.
So Julie, if you can just send us the link.
I'll attempt to find that and send it to you. It is on the city website, and what I'll do is I'll send you a video of the meeting and tell you where to fast forward to. Oh.
And Ms. Tolleman?
Can you just email it to me then, Mr. Jackson? Okay.
Just as we're wrapping up, I know Mr. Wilcox, I know still has to speak, but we had one other item in our piece of paper in our agenda package that I don't believe we got to, some release and waiver of liability form, and I didn't know if that was something we were...
That was related to Mr. Sims' issue.
Yep, that was
part of the
Mr.
review
Sims'
process
issue.
where he said he went through an additional steps that other people didn't go through.
Okay, thank you.
And Julie, maybe you, if the city has written policies concerning the 3 minutes and concerning materials that would be, how materials are handled if a presenter wants to come with a packet of materials, wants to come with a video, how all of that is handled, or whether there is no policy on it. Mr. Wilcox, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'll be really brief. I mentioned at your last meeting that the Ethics Board had pretty much fallen off the radar of the city's website, and I just wanted to thank Julie. I guess she was able to get you're back on the front page now, and I think that's really good. But somebody at the last meeting suggested maybe you might want to consider doing your own separate website, and I think that might be, something to keep in mind and consider. You could, if you did have your own website, you could do things like promote the rebate program and, some of that, and maybe be a little more aggressive in trying to get people to report complaints and fraud and that sort of thing. So.
Okay, noted. Anything else? Any member has issue, comments, concerns, congratulations? Mr. Davis had a nice family wedding. With that, we are, until next month, our meeting is Tuesday, June 19th, 4 o'clock in this room. We are adjourned.